in different ways. Different people want to respond in different ways. So that's a big conversation, if you like. That's a big global conversation.
It can be very comforting to rely on ideology. For example, political ideology or religious ideology or even a scientific ideology. But what's also interesting with something like this that would come out is you would have scientists trying to conduct, the research and development required to develop this technology and actually get to space. They would see very quickly that the soft science issues are as hazardous, as fraught with danger as the hard science issues.
That's Phil Searles, an anthropologist who has studied the social impacts of space research. A game-changing event such as the discovery of extraterrestrial life might raise questions about our existing social structures and about how they might need to change.
When you use an enormous amount of resources, you're going to probably be encroaching on other communities and other people's space. You probably have to revamp a launch site or augment it, or maybe even find a new launch site, and there's a good chance that that's going to displace people or make people angry. And so you're going to have all these different kinds of stakeholders where some people are going to want it for different reasons, and some people are going to try to stop it. And then you have the impact of things like social media, where people are going to politicize it because it's something that would cost billions and billions of dollars.
And speaking of different groups with different priorities, York University's Kathryn Denning pulls all of these groups together into the big question. Who exactly is the we we're referring to anyway?
I think the answer to that depends on who we is. If we're talking about the scientists, the astronomical community involved in actually listening to and receiving the broadcasts, they would be coordinating between different radio astronomy observatories in order to make sure that they were getting the best quality signal coming in, and also just ensuring that the detection, the reception wasn't subject to all the different problems that you run into in observational astronomy. There are plenty of them. So they would be coordinating between different bases, say, Parkes in Australia, say probably FAST in China, say Arecibo, the Hat Creek Observatory that the SETI Institute runs, all the different observatories, Green Bank, certainly in West Virginia, in facilities in Argentina, everywhere. They would all be coordinating to make sure that they had as much duplication and redundancy in receiving the signal as possible. So that would be well handled from the formal scientific community side. I think what might be very interesting as well, though, is if the signals were going on for any length of time, you might see a lot of private interest in either buying radio telescope time or even perhaps building some new ones in order to have an additional stream coming in. So it's all down to the who is we, because I think we've got a lot of different interests in space now. There's the kind of the standard civilian astronomy community. There is some overlap in anything to do with space with military interests, and there's more and more private interests in space. So I think also if the signal was of significant strength, you'd have pretty well everybody who had any kind of dish of any kind that could potentially receive the signal training it on the skies.
Even without a confirmed transmission, the scientific community is divided. Should we make contact ourselves? Is it too risky? At least one person we spoke with, Dr. Joel Myers at the Canadian Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics at the University of Toronto, thinks that it would be worth it.
So in the event that we were able to listen first, there is some advantage to taking our time, especially given that there is a lag in any communication with a civilization that's 4 light years away. It doesn't matter that we don't respond within the first year. Our message will take 4 years to get there, whether we send it today or whether we send it 1 year from now. So I think there's some advantage in being able to assess the situation for some time before reaching out. In the longer term, I would hope that we would take as much information as we could from the signals that we were receiving, and I'm cautiously optimistic that there is a way to begin communication at that point. And I do think it would be useful to take advantage of the opportunity to exchange information. It becomes a much more fruitful endeavor, no matter what you hope the long-term payoff is, if it's a two-way street rather than just us listening. So on the whole, I would say, despite the risk of the possibility that they are in fact hostile, the potential reward for a two-way conversation makes it worthwhile to reach out.
Well, I think that, of course, you don't really get to to define what's going to happen next, because we've had some false alarms, and we know what happens in the beginning. And what happens in the beginning is that the media go completely bonkers and start calling you up, and you're just totally swamped with your phone melting down on your desk because they want to write about the story.
That's Seth Shostak again, senior SETI scientist.
What you would know at that point is, well, there's somebody out there who can build a transmitter. That's basically all you'd know. But very quickly, by doing some fairly simple experiments, you could figure out, where it was coming from rather precisely. And so then you would train an ordinary telescope, a mirror telescope, if you will, on that spot on the sky and see if you could find a star, and maybe even a star with a planet, if you could find the planet. I mean, you'd want to know how far away is the signal coming from and in which direction, and is there a planet there? At that point, I think that the public would be saying two things. They'd say, well, what are they saying? And secondly, are we going to talk back? Now, let me take that second one first. Talking back, I think that's hard to stop. Some people are going to want to talk back, and they'll just try and do it. But, the aliens might be hundreds of light years away, which means if you talk back and say, hey, we're the Earthlings, we've heard you, and we'd really love to get together, and can we have a party sometime? It might take hundreds of years for that signal to get there, and if they even hear it, then it would take another couple of hundred years for them to, respond back to you. So that's a long experiment. I think that the more interesting thing would be, well, what are they saying? And to actually know that, you have to be able to pick up the message. And that's technically very difficult. It would require a very, very, very much bigger antenna, 10,000 times bigger than perhaps what you have. And so that's a big, expensive project, and that would take years to do. But I think that the interest would be there. I mean, we're willing to spend billions of dollars on building walls. I think we could spend, a few $1 billion building a big antenna, because it might cost that amount to actually get the message. And then you'd have to try and understand the message, which, of course, might or might not ever succeed. I mean, they might be so far advanced that you just don't understand the message.
What do you think? Would you want to reach out? Would you want your tax dollars put to work building a giant antenna, or investing in a translation project that might never succeed? This has been Transmission Podcast, hosted by Cecilia Lynn Jacobs and produced by Ian Garrett and Kate Ladenheim. With special thanks to today's guests:
Aaron Zimmerman,
Pippa Goldschmidt,
Beth Billar,
Dr. Duncan Forgan,
Seth Shostak,
Phil Searles,
Kathryn Denning,
Avi Loeb,
Pete Worden.
Joel Myers.
Original composition and sound editing by Miles Avery. Transmission is a podcast and performance series speculating on what might happen if we began to receive the popular broadcasts of intelligent alien life, and follows two sisters selected to lead an interstellar mission to make first contact. Learn more about our team and upcoming performances at luxterra.com, and find us on Facebook and Twitter at Luxterra. That's LUXTATERRA. Transmission is a production of Toaster Lab in Canada and is a fiscally sponsored project of Fractured Atlas in the United States.